Hey everyone, I'm back. Today I am going to be doing a video that is not an update to my free-to-play account, but is instead one of the videos that will be talking about some content that I think is either under-discussed or discussed in a slightly different way than I view it. So today it's just going to be talking about why I think Kael is the best starter. So everyone has their own video about this, an opinion about why he's the best, and most of them are roughly the same. But I do have something slightly different that I view it as the reason that he is the best. And before I get started, I do want to emphasize this is a game, right? So it's whatever is going to cause you to enjoy it the most. So if you have a visceral, in your gut, will cause you pain if you choose an elf or over an orc, by all means choose Gaelic. Use Gaelic, have a great time. This is just why I personally chose Kael and the reasoning behind that. So I'm going to jump right into it. Before I talk about Kael specifically, I do want to talk about a couple of economic terms that are the reason that I feel Kael is the best. One of which I think gets talked about a decent amount in the raid community, and I'm very happy about, and that's opportunity costs, right? So in general, we have a good grasp about what costs are, right? So if we go to Brutal here, in Brimstone Path, or 12, campaign level 12, we can look and see that both stage 2 and stage 3, they cost the same amount of energy. And through any number of sources, you'll see that they actually just give the same amount of experience. So we see that the cost is the same for the obvious cost, but there is an opportunity cost here. An opportunity cost is the cost of choosing the action that you're using over all other actions. So the easiest example here is most of the time we choose stage 3 because in general shields give more silver than helmets, right? So we see that it's all going to be spirit affinity, so the same types of champions are going to farm these. It's going to cost us the same. We're going to get a little bit more silver, but this is going to be much more silver in the very long run compared to doing stage 2 for getting a helmet instead. And that's the idea of opportunity cost. What could I be doing instead? Now, in terms of starter champions, to look at opportunity costs, what we need to do is, first of all, just look at what the other starter champions are. So first of all, we have Aethel as one of the starters. And we want to think about what are we giving up by choosing Kael. Now, Aethel, one of the big things here is the A1 attacks 3 times and has a chance to place Weaken. And Weaken is really good early game. And that's kind of what we're giving up by choosing Kael over Aethel. Because Aethel is definitely better in Fire Knight, and having that extra weaken debuff for clan boss and dungeons is something we are actually giving up by choosing Kael, right? Now, Kael does have his own advantages, but we are giving this up, and that's something we need to keep in mind. So Aethel is definitely better than Fire Knight, and having the weaken would be quite nice for earlier on dungeons and clan boss. The other starter I want to look at, or another starter I want to look at real quick, is Gaelic here. So his A1 attacks twice as opposed to Kael's 1. So again, it's a little bit better for Fire Knight. And that one, so this attacks 4 times at random, so same as Kael. But this, instead of doing poison like Kael does, has a chance to decrease defense, right? So we're getting a little bit more utility out of Gaelic, whereas opposed for Kael, all we're getting is damage, right? So the only difference here for something like Fire Knight for Gaelic is he attacks twice instead of Kael's once, so it is better for breaking that shield and progressing through Fire Knights. And again, if we didn't have any other decreased defense champion, this would be good as well, especially for the dungeons and clan boss. And then the last other option that we can choose is in the High Elves. We have Elhain. Now, Elhain doesn't bring any more debuffs, but every single one of her abilities has the ability to either hit everything, so it makes her a great farmer, or hit things twice. So her A1 hits twice if it's critical, her A3 hits twice. So again, I would say she's probably slightly better than Kael for breaking the shield consistently, because you don't have to worry about, well, did Kael's A3 land before the shield went up or not, stuff like that. Just having a multi-hit A1 is quite nice, and again, like has more AOE, so Elhain's a slightly better farmer. So when we think about it, what are we giving up by choosing Kael? And at the end of the day, it's really not a lot in terms of opportunity costs, right? So Fire Knight is not something we want to focus on early on. Most of our relatively early game focus is going to end up being leveling up champions, working on clan boss, working on arena, and trying to get dragons up to 20 on farm. Right? Because we can get dragon 20 on farm, then we can start making meaningful progress in the rest of the game, just getting the gear from there. So not being able to be quite as good in Fire Knight doesn't really mean much to me for an early game choice. In terms of the debuffs that are brought, the fact that War Maiden is so easy to farm and brings a very, very good and consistent defense down means that I'm not really worried at all about missing out on the defense down from Gaelic or as much the weaken from Aethel. So I'm not too concerned about that aspect of it. And as I'm going to talk about in a later video, I don't think campaign farmers need the same sort of emphasis that others do. So the fact that Elhain is a better campaign farmer by some amount, that doesn't make any difference at all to me in terms of comparing Elhain and Kael. So opportunity cost is kind of a reason that we look at for whether or not to choose Kael. But the other economic term for me that's a bigger difference is what we call risk aversion. Right? Now, risk aversion, it basically boils down to how willing is a person to gamble, right? Like, are they willing to take a bit of a risk, or are they going to avoid that as much as they can? So like the best example, if you can think of, is shard openings, right? Like there's several schools of thought, especially for early accounts, right? Like you get a sacred shard, maybe you should open it immediately, because if you get an account changing legendary or epic, like getting that as early as you can is going to jumpstart your progress and it'll be fantastic for you. Another school of thought is, well, you should always save them for a 2 times just because you're much more likely to get one of those game-changing champions. And then another school of thought is you want to make sure that not only are you waiting for a 2 times, but you're also waiting for a good summoning rush or some other event like that to get an extra bonus for opening those during a 2 times event. So you're guaranteeing yourself to be making some amount of meaningful progress while you're also opening these shards and hoping for something game-changing. And to me, risk aversion is why I choose Kael over the other starter champions. And it's not because, like the sacred shards are going to be something I get a lot, but it's in terms of the longer term of the game, we are reasonably confident that we will open a better arena nuker or farmer than one of the starter champions. We are also reasonably likely to open a better poisoner than Kael, and even the medium to long term. So for me, I would much rather pick a champion that can fill multiple roles, because if I start with Elhain and I get a great poisoner, I'm set. Like that's fantastic for me. On the other hand, if I start with Elhain and I get a great nuker, well, I've kind of at some point I know I'm going to replace Elhain, and then where am I going to be using Elhain past that? Whereas if I chose Kael, if I open a great nuker, great, then I'm going to focus him on dungeons and clan boss and make him more emphasized on his poisons. So to replace Kael in my everyday teams, like what I would use, I need to get both a better nuker and at least one, possibly two better poisoners to replace him overall. And that's why I think Kael is the best starter, because I am risk averse. And I'm going to be trying to get all of my resources, get the most use possible out of them. So if it turns out that I'm unlucky with shards completely, I have a good poisoner. If I'm incredibly lucky with shards, then it doesn't matter what champion I started with. And if I'm somewhere in the middle, right, like I get a game-changing poisoner, great, Kael can still be my nuker. Or if I get a game-changing nuker, great, Kael can still be my poisoner. But at the end of the day, no matter where I land in the type of RNG, I'm not really behind at all or very much if I choose Kael, but I'm potentially very far ahead. So the risk aversion aspect of it is really the reason that I think Kael is the best starting champion. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit more on risk aversion here in a few days when I'm talking about another free-to-play update and whether or not I'm going to open these void shards this weekend, because it is a 2x weekend, and it's going to depend a lot on what the event looks like. But I will speak more to that later on. And for today, that's really all I have for you. I just wanted to get those sort of ideas out there and be making you guys kind of think about both risk aversion, where you stand on that spectrum, and opportunity costs to making these decisions in game so that you can make the decision that is best for you. Because the decision that's best for me is not going to necessarily be what's best for you, but I want to give you the most information that I can to help you make those decisions. So thanks again for watching this. Please comment below if there's anything you disagree with or think that I could be doing better. And I would love to see you in my Twitch stream if possible. I stream every night right around reset for a couple of hours until I run out of energy on this account. So feel free to come hang out. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.